Hi, I'm Gavin. So I thought I'd do a video about the wonderful world of frame rates, and then I'll do a second video about shutters and shutter angles and how that works. So here we go. So frame rates, obviously they are how the picture, the speed of the frames passed in front of the human eye when you show a video or whatever. It all started with like black and white silent movies where they used to hand crank the films. And so when they played them back, obviously you've seen this on the old movies doing this business. When they played back, it was about 16 to 20 frames per second that was done at. So when you see some of the old Buster Keaton movies and stuff like that play back today, they're being sped up slightly because obviously there's no dialogue, so you can do that. And it was used to be in the theatre, there was some chap with a piano play underneath it. So realistically, and even the projectionist could adjust the speed of the film as it was going through. And then they introduced sound. Now, sound is much more, the change of frequency of sound is much more perceptible to the human ear. So you can't go around changing frequencies or having variances with sound. So they had to lock off the frame rate. And they locked that frame rate off at what you know today is 24 frames per second. 24 frames per second is really, really handy frame rate, to tell you the truth, if you think about it, because it's divisible by 2. So half a second at 24 frames per second is 12 frames, a quarter of a second is 6 frames. So very, very useful because it's divisible. So there you have it. You've got, that's how film sort of came about. Now, there is another problem, and I'll talk about this more with when I talk about shutter speeds and stuff like that. So when you play this film back through a projector, it's very flickery because you're just seeing this stream as it's being pulled up pulled down through the projector. So they came up with a rotating shutter system, and this shutter they used to have 2s and then 4s. Thomas Edison, really smart guy, said that you need at least to show a human 46 frames per second for it to be perceived that it's fluid motion. So they came up with a system of a rotating shutter with, first of all, with 2 segments on it, which would spin as the film went through the projector, and that would give it a shutter in the projector of 1/48, which is double 24. So that would give you 48 frames. You'd see 48 frames, and it would appear fluid. The more modern projectors have 3 blades, and that puts up 72 frames. So you're seeing. It gets rid of the flicker, and it's like how you see it. So that rotating shutter thing gives us that perceived fluid motion of film. Anyway, so that's film very quickly with 24 frames per second. They do now do, obviously, Peter Jackson did The Hobbit at 48. I think that they've done some, Gemini Man, I think, is at 120 frames a second or something. They're trying different formats and speeds of playback, because obviously the faster the speed. Peter Jackson said that 48 frames per second. I mean, I saw The Hobbit in the cinema. It's a tricky one. I think when you watch more of it at 48 frames, you'll get used to it, but it's much more realistic, more hyper real in a way. But they're trying higher frame rates. This is a big thing, playing back at higher frame rates in cinemas. That's sort of the future. I think James Cameron's doing it as well. They're moving forward, makes it feel more fluid and more smooth. But obviously, because we're transitioning, when we first see those high frame rate movies, they do throw it slightly. Anyway, so that's basically cinema. And then we move on to the wonderful world of television. Now, television gets pretty confusing. Basically, we've got three global standards for TV. We've got CCAM, which is Russia and some areas over there, which is 25 frames a second, but with a different color setup. We've got PAL, which is 25 frames a second, and that is again slightly different from CCAM. And then we've got NTSC. Now, originally NTSC for black and white TVs was 30 frames a second, and these figures are based off the power grids. So we've got 50 hertz electricity in the United Kingdom, so 25 is based off of 50 hertz. In the US, they've got 60 hertz electricity system, so the 30 frames was based off the 60. Great, because they're like really solid frequencies to work from. However, when they introduced colour into the NTSC signal, it created a problem called dot crawl, which caused artifacts on the screen. So what they did to get around this was slow down the frame rate by 1%. And this gives you 2997. So you then see that's the amount of frames. So it's very weird. It's 30, but it's 2997. But that gets rid of the problem with the color information interfering and creating dot crawl on a screen. So we've got those three base standards. We've got, CCAM, PAL, and NTSC. However, much like cinema, we aren't getting the 46 frames per second on screen that Edison wanted. So to do this, you need to actually do something else. We do something called, and obviously with your television equipment, you have to do interlacing. So interlacing was created to basically chuck up, like for America, it would be like 60 frames per second would be seen on the screen, because you're splitting the frame into two areas, same as PAL, 50 frames per second, because you're actually splitting the frame. So you're sending half a frame up and a second frame immediately afterwards, and this gets rid of the flicker, and this gives us the interlacing. Interlacing is a bit of a pain. I mean, I think the American is bottom up first, and then UK is lower down first. It's how it writes on the screen, and it can get confusing. People can accidentally reverse interlacing, and that creates a rather crazy effect. If you want to look at how you use reverse interlacing, there's a 9 Inch Nails video called The Hand That Feeds, and they've reversed the interlacing on that. So when Trent Reznor moves, he actually begins to fall to pieces. It's a really good example of how you do it badly, or to fail QC. If you want to do it like that, that'll fail QC. So that whole effect was done for that video. It fitted in with the entire creative look for the album, so it worked really well. But there you go, that's reverse interlacing going on in that video. So yeah, so you've got this 60 frames per second for America, and you've got 50 frames per second in the United Kingdom. I mean, now obviously the refresh rates of screens have gone up massively. You've got 100 hertz screens, you've got 75 hertz, 120 hertz screens. So interlacing's not really as big a problem as it was. So I believe now that they're not shooting interlaced. You don't shoot interlaced anymore. I haven't shot interlaced for years. Basically, you can just shoot progressively, and that can go up, because obviously it can get that amount of frames on the screen at the right time and to perceive the fluid motion. You do get some TVs that've got that silky smooth judder motion and stuff like that, effects that you can apply on things. But yeah, so that's the basis of frame rates. They're your base ones. Now, everything starts to get a bit more interesting when you start to use, when you go into I'll start again. When you go into a project, it's really, really important you work out what you're delivering. So the world's changed. If you're delivering, like a content creator, you're delivering to YouTube takes loads of frame rates. So you can shoot in any of the ones that YouTube takes. If you're shooting for something like broadcast, you have to stick to the adhered standard deliverables. There'll be a delivery sheet. You can download them from each TV station. It tells you what they want you to deliver. Cinemas, 24, you can actually deliver at different 25 now, because they've changed the standard. The DCP, which is the digital cinema projection package that goes up, used to be conformed to like 24 frames a second, with certain things, but they enrolled in what's called SMTPE DCPs, which allow you to play back at 25 in a cinema. So you can change, there's different speeds you can play back, so you don't need to get speed conversions done if you're trying to put a movie in a cinema. So that's it. So really, beginning of a project, you need to work out where this project's going to end up, and that's your base frame rate. Now, so I'm going to YouTube and I'm going to shoot 24 because it takes 24. Once you've established that, then you can start to get creative with your frame rates. Now, everybody loves slow motion, none more than Zack Snyder. I mean, I think if you played back 300 at real speed, it would last 45 minutes. There's so much slow motion in that movie. But then you can get creative with frame rates. So yeah, so say you shoot at 24. Now you can start to go up and shoot 48, different speeds, all the way up, and create great effects. Now, one of the ones that I've always loved, and I've done in the past, is when you shoot at 24, you then overcrank, it's called it, and you go to 36. So you shoot at 36, and if you're doing music videos, this is especially this beautiful effect. You get the band to play back. I believe it's 140%. They don't play back. It's playback, and they lip sync to it, or they sync to it. And I think it's 140%. So the music's faster. They play back or sing or pretend to sing back at that speed, And then when you play 36 frames in a standard timeline, you get this beautiful fluid effect. There's a really good, I'll put a link to it at the bottom. Coldplay's Up and Up. If you watch Chris Martin and the band playing, they're playing at 30, that's being shot at 36 frames per second. It gives you that silky, smooth, dreamy effect. You can do it with 30. I mean, you can do it when you do use audio, you've got a lot more freedom. If you do 30, if you say shoot 24, got 24 timeline, and you shoot 30 frames per second, and then you slow it down by 80%, again, you get a really nice sort of dreamy effect. So you can do that. I mean, obviously, with 24, if you go to 48, now you're into the realms of slow motion. You go all the way up, and it gives you these great effects. And obviously now cameras can do them. The camera I'm shooting on now can go up to 120 frames per second. It can do, actually, this one could do 8K at 60p, and then 120 at 4K. So I mean, I could go nuts with it and do that. So that's the sort of wonderful world of frame rates. I've seen a lot of these videos that says what frame rate should you shoot to be cinematic, all these kind of things. I don't really think that's too big of a deal. I mean, I think the motion cadence is slightly different. A lot of it's to do with your shutter angle. Cinematics much more to do with the lighting, the costumes, what you're filming, the atmosphere. If it's shot at 25, you probably watched a DCP in the cinema or something at 25 and not even realised it. So I don't think the frame rate is as important as you think it is. I think the whole idea is when you do a project is just plan it, film it, and make sure that you can deliver it properly, and it just looks great. So spend the money on this side of the camera as opposed to mucking around on that side of the camera. So yeah, but yeah, frame rates. I mean, it's a weird and wonderful world of them. You can have a lot of fun with frame rates. You just need to make some decisions early on in a project. Where's it going to go? What do I need to deliver? Because obviously, if you shoot at 50p and you want to play it back at 50p and then you try and down convert, because the conversions between some of the frame rates aren't great. There's one last frame rate I'm going to mention, which is a weird one, but it's what used to be in the days of HDR, HD cam tapes and stuff like this. And I suppose now used to be called the universally convertible format, which is 23976, or you may know it as 2398. If you try and convert that with all the different conversions with tape decks and stuff like that, you don't need to do this anymore. It was the one that you could convert easier to every other single format, apart from, I think the only one that was a problem was 25, was going from 2398 to 25 was problematic. But yeah, so, and I've shot in 2398 for global delivery because it's easier to actually, it's an easier conversion. So it's very set rules to them to convert to all the other formats. It used to be called the universally convertible format. You don't see it so much anymore. I mean, but I think they actually still use it, but they just don't talk about it because obviously it's much easier if you're converting to different formats. I mean, if you're shooting with Netflix, it doesn't matter. But yeah, so there you go. So I hope that's useful. If you've got any questions about frame rates, I've unfortunately had to deal with them for a very, very long time, and the conversions of them, pitch correction, all this sort of rubbish. Just ask in the comments. I hope that was useful. Thanks.